Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Let's give a few
Hare
minutes.
Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol, Hare Krishna, Amit Prabhu. Let's give a few minutes to the devotees to join. Just a minute or two. Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So as the devotees are gathering, let us start with the Mangala Charan, and so that we have enough time to discuss, because there are so many wonderful things to hear and chant. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanachhalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते राधानाथ स्वामी नामने नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे मुकम करोति वाचालम भंगम लंघयते गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्री गुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानंद माधवम श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरम हरि ओम तत्सत्। जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद। Hare Krishna. So thank you for the devotees who have taken time to join the series of Chaitanya Pravaha. We have just launched this series. Today is the second class in this particular series. The first class last week was an inaugural class where we sought blessings. His Grace Chiranjeev Prabhu came and gave an inaugural address, shared the importance of the topic that we are discussing. We also had some discussion in our last class where we discussed an overview of Chaitanya Charitamrita. We discussed about the various biographies of Lord Chaitanya. We discussed about the special position of Chaitanya Charitamrita. We broadly discussed how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are structured across the Adi Lila, Madhya Lila, Antya Lila. We also discussed about what are the sources from which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, has based this wonderful work. Anybody remembers how many verses are there in Chaitanya Charitamrita that we discussed last time?
11,000, Prabhuji.
Exact number, yes, 11,000.
519.
Hari Bol Jai. Thank you, Suresh Prabhu. 11,519. Anybody remembers how many chapters in Chaitanya Charitamrita? Going 1, going 2, going 3. Okay, 62 chapters. Okay, across Adi, Madhya, and Antya Lila. So we discussed this at a high level, and we broadly discussed what is the broad area of the pastimes covered in Adi Lila, what is the broad area covered in Madhya Lila, what is the broad area covered in the Antya Lila. We are just recapping what we discussed last time for those who are just joining. And we also discussed the modalities of how we are planning to conduct this Chaitanya Pravaha series. And I want to reiterate that we are not going to be going verse by verse. Otherwise, you can imagine 11,519 divided by around 55, 56 weeks in a year. You can imagine it will take 10, 15 years or perhaps more. I have not even done the maths. But the idea of this particular series is to give us an overview of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, to give us a taste, an appreciation, a connect with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because the personality of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so central for us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. The very fact that we are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we are not just Vaishnavas, we are Vaishnavas, but we are Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Gaudiya Vaishnavas are the Vaishnavas who are the followers of Lord Chaitanya. So how can we be Gaudiya Vaishnavas unless we really understand who is Lord Chaitanya? What are his pastimes? What is his mission? What are his instructions? So this is an humble attempt to get an overview of all these topics. We discussed how Chaitanya Charitamrita will be the anchoring book for this Pravaha. And we will try to follow it as far as possible in a sequential manner, even though we are not committing that we will always do that. But we may also leverage on some of the other biographical works, such as Chaitanya Bhagwat, to be more specific, and maybe some other books where it is needed for certain specific pastimes. Because deliberately, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, out of deference and respect to Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of Chaitanya Bhagwat, he has deliberately not discussed in detail those early pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, which Vrindavan Das Thakur has already described in great detail in the Chaitanya Bhagwat. So we may go into some details from Chaitanya Bhagwat because we want to relish the pastimes. And in fact, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami encourages his readers to read more from there. So we will follow the instructions of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and we will draw some nectar from there, especially for the Adi Lila. Because the Chaitanya Bhagwat primarily covers the pastimes of the Lord which map to the Adi Lila. Adi Lila is that part of the life of the Lord which is from his appearance up to his taking sannyas. The first 24 years of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. So the focus of today's discussion, my intention is to start with a broad overview of Adi Lila, which is part 1 out of the 3 parts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, to give a broad overview and start with chapter 1 and especially focus on the Mangalacharan. Now you may say, Prabhu, you just recited Mangalacharan. Why this Mangalacharan? When we get into the Mangalacharan of Chaitanya Charitamrita, we will understand how deep and profound it is. Oh, it is. And we will talk about that in a fair amount of detail today. So out of the 62 chapters, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the first 17 chapters constitute the Adi Lila. The subsequent 25 chapters constitute the Madhya Lila, and the last 20 chapters constitute the Antya Lila. So 17 plus 25 plus 20 is equal to 62. Now I just want to give you a general overview of what Adi Lila covers. Now why this overview is important? You may say, Prabhu, why not just get into it? Yes, we will get into it. But when you see the Adi Lila, you will realize out of the 17 chapters of Adi Lila, only 5 chapters are on pastimes. The first 12 chapters of Adi Lila are a deeply, profoundly philosophical work. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami spends the first 12 chapters and dedicates the first 12 out of the 17 chapters of the Adi Lila to serve as a preface to the entire work. Can you imagine? A 12 chapter preface. And why this was so important is because, like what I mentioned, Chaitanya Charitamrita was not meant just to serve as a book of the Leela. It was designed to serve both as a philosophical treatise on the tattva and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What does tattva of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mean? Establishing the divine identity of Lord Chaitanya and his principal associates. Philosophically based on Shastra and sound Shastric logic. Logic based on Shastra is Shastric logic. Shastra Yukti. So good 12 chapters out of the 17 are dedicated to philosophy. And out of these 12 chapters, the first 12, 12 plus 5 is 17, right? The 5 at the end of the Adi Lila are the 5 chapters on Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, from appearance up to sannyas. 5 chapters. And what they constitute briefly, we will come into that and we will discuss that a bit. The reason why I want to mention you that these 12 chapters of philosophy is, I want to prepare you to understand that the way Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has approached this work is by ensuring that he has established very clearly, shastrically, philosophically, the divine position of Lord Chaitanya and his associates before discussing the pastimes. And this is very important. If we read the pastimes of Sri Krishna, or if we discuss the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, or for that matter any other divine incarnation of the Lord, if we do not understand and have faith in the divine transcendental position of the Lord, and we do not have that faith, then we will not be able to derive proper benefit by hearing those pastimes. It is not that we will not get any benefit, because anybody who hears in any way will get benefit. But to the extent we have faith and to the extent we have understanding, is who is this person that we are hearing about? Who is this person who ate clay? I'm talking about Krishna's Lila, where Krishna ate clay when he was a very young boy. If I eat clay or one of you eat clay, is it going to be written down in scriptures, oh, Gaur Chandra Das ate clay? It is no news. But when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is served by Lakshmi Sahasrashata Sambrahma Sevyamanam, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamham Bhajami, whom millions and millions of gopis are serving their feet. When he eats clay, people are inquisitive. Oh, this Lord is eating clay. So we have to understand the position of the personality whose pastimes we are discussing. So that is why I am encouraging all of you attendees to also have the patience to carefully listen to and understand the tattva of Lord Chaitanya and his associates before we get into the pastimes proper. But having said that, I also want to say one more thing, that because this series is meant to be a Pravaha, a flow, intentionally I do not want this particular series to be too philosophical. So I'm going to give an overview. When we go through the first 12 chapters, I'm going to be giving an overview rather than going into too much philosophical detail. I will encourage those who want to have a more detailed study to read in parallel so that they can relish and understand the finer and deeper points which are presented by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So again, what I mentioned is Adi Lila is 17 chapters. The first 12 chapters are the preface and the last 5 chapters are the early pastimes of the Lord. Now the first 7 chapters out of the 12 chapters which are the preface are the explanation or purports of the Mangalacharan of Chaitanya Charitamrita itself. This is very interesting. The Mangalacharan of Chaitanya Charitamrita is the first 14 verses, 1-4 of the first chapter of Adi Lila. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami spends the first 7 chapters discussing and expanding on the 14 verses, the first 14 verses which form the Mangalacharan. So you can understand how profoundly important the Mangalacharan itself is. And we will go through that today. The 14 verses. They are very purifying, very beautiful verses. And please understand the 14 verses that we will come to in a short while are the subject matter of the first 7 chapters of the Adi Lila. So after having discussed in the Adi Lila with respect to all these various tattvas which are highlighted in the first 14 verses, and we will come to that shortly, what are the tattvas discussed. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the 8th chapter of the Adi Lila discusses the Chaitanya Lila Varnana Karana, why he wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He gives a description of how he, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, what was his inspiration to write Chaitanya Charitamrita. So very briefly, we will going to discuss when we get to that chapter, but very briefly, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Now, who is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami? This is also explained. Srila Prabhupada, in the introduction of the first chapter of the Adi Lila, explains this very beautifully. He says, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, non-different. The most confidential associate of Lord Chaitanya is Swarupa Damodar Goswami, who was always with the Lord, especially in the Lord's later pastimes. In the Lord's most confidential experience of the greatest ecstasies Swarup Damodar Goswami is none other than Lalita Sakhi, the most confidential Sakhis. Lalita and Vishakha, the most confidential associate Sakhis of Srimati Radharani. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha and Krishna combined, or rather Krishna in the mood of Radharani. Lalita Sakhi in the form of Swarup Damodar Goswami is actively serving him and facilitating the experience of his deep, profound spiritual moods. Swarup Damodar Goswami acted like a shelter-giving guru to Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Rupa and Sanatan are practically the most important acharyas in terms of writing the philosophical works on which the whole Krishna consciousness movement is based, and they did it on the instructions of Lord Chaitanya himself. And the disciple of Rup and Sanatan is Raghunath Das Goswami. And this Raghunath Das Goswami was the spiritual master of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is so close in that sense to Lord Chaitanya. Because Raghunath Das Goswami had direct, very close interactions with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And many of the pastimes of the beautiful interaction that Raghunath Das Goswami had are mentioned, especially in the Madhya Lila. Very beautiful pastimes. When we come to them, we'll discuss. Raghunath Das Goswami, who's the Prayojana Acharya, so renounced, the epitome of humility and the epitome of renunciation, Raghunath Das Goswami. Amazing. Later he came to Puri and he also took association of Lord Chaitanya, and then he spent so much time on the banks of Radha Kund. So very, very beautiful. So just so that you understand the parampara, Srila Prabhupada explains that from Lord Chaitanya, Swarup Damodar Goswami, from Swarup Damodar to Rupa and Sanatan, from Rup to Raghunath, and then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. That's why throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami at the end of practically every chapter will glorify Rup and Raghunath and say that I am the humble servant of the feet of Rup and Raghunath. Rupa Raghunatha Pade Hoibe Akuti. Of course, that's a prayer by Narottam Das Thakur, but in that mood, Rupa and Raghunath. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's disciple is Narottam Das Thakur. Narottam Das Thakur, further in the disciplic succession, is Vrindavan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, then Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and then Prabhupada, and then the current ISKCON Gurus, and then all of us. So we are all in direct line of spiritual descent from Lord Chaitanya. So our generation, I'm just counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We, who are initiated by the disciples of Prabhupada, are the 13th in direct disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. So we are all part of the tree of Lord Chaitanya. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains the reason. He says how he received instructions from the great acharyas, and this is discussed in the 8th chapter of the Adi Lila. He received instructions from the great Vaishnavas, and then he sought blessings of Madan Mohan because he was feeling so unqualified in spite of being so qualified. And he went to the Madan Mohan temple in Vrindavan, which is the worshipable deities of Sanatan Goswami. He went to Lord Madan Mohan and prayed to him and asked him that, please give me blessings. This is what all the devotees are telling me, but I'm feeling unqualified. because he said, I will write only if the Lord instructs me. And Lord Madan Mohan dropped a garland from the deity, and the pujari took the garland and put it on Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami took it as the blessing and instructions of the Lord that this seva to the Vaishnavas should be fulfilled. And then he took up to this task of compiling this magnum opus. So some of these things, including some glories of the holy name, are discussed in the 8th chapter of Adi Lila. The 9 to 12 chapter of the Adi Lila essentially cover the description of the divine transcendental tree of Lord Chaitanya. So this whole Krishna consciousness movement led by Lord Chaitanya is compared to a spiritual tree. So there's a beautiful analogy that is described. How this tree, it is said, it originated from the seed of Madhavendra Puri. And how Lord Chaitanya is the main tree trunk, and how two branches of Lord Nityananda and Lord Advaita came from this main trunk, and then how so many branches, sub-branches, and then trees and twigs. And in that way, this whole transcendental tree of Lord Chaitanya spread in all directions. And what is the objective of this tree? To give the fruit of Krishna Prema to everyone. So this is a very beautiful example, and this is described in great detail in the chapters 9 to 12 in the Adi Lila. And how this tree is giving shade and shelter to all the suffering living entities in Kali Yuga. And that is the primary purpose. So even all of us here who are 31 families who are right now here listening to these beautiful descriptions of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we are also part of the tree. Of course, we are so insignificant. We are not, most of us may not be branches. Some may be just twigs, some may be leaves, but doesn't matter. We are still part of the tree of Lord Chaitanya. And through this analogy of the tree, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami lists all the various principal associates and the associates of Lord Chaitanya. So many names of so many great pure devotees who descended from the spiritual world to assist Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his pastimes are listed across chapters 9 to 12. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami especially says that these devotees are so great that just if you remember the names of these devotees, one attains freedom from material entanglement and receives shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. So, it is not that, oh, it's a way, I have to go through so many names, this, that. No, just by remembering and hearing about the names with faith of these great associates, one can be free from material entanglement and get shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. So that brings us to the first 12 chapters. The last 5 chapters of the Adi Lila, anybody remembers? What do they cover? Yes. Yes. So after covering the first 12 chapters of philosophy, the first 7 being primarily the explanation of the Mangalacharan, where various tattvas of Lord Chaitanya are explained. Then, and the tattvas include Lord Chaitanya himself and Nityananda and Advaita and the Pancha Tattva. These are the primary topics across the Mangalacharan, which are expanded into the first 7 chapters. Again, I'm repeating, Lord Chaitanya and his tattva, his principle, who he is, why he appeared. It also covers the divine position of Lord Nityananda. It also covers the divine position of Lord Advaita. And the 7th chapter concludes with the description of the Panchatattva. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. This Panchatattva Pranam verse is expanded and explained in the 7th chapter. The 8th chapter discussed how it is, why Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, why and how. And 9 to 12, we just discussed is the tree of the divine transcendental tree of Lord Chaitanya. So the last 5 chapters of the Adi Lila, 13 to 17, briefly recounts the pastimes of the Lord from his birth or appearance to the point of the Lord's taking sannyas. So the Lord's pastime in this period are divided into 5 subparts. The chapter 13 especially speaks about the Lord's appearance on Falgum Purnima, how the Lord appeared amidst the chanting of the holy names. Then the chapter 14 discuss about the Balya Lila of the Lord, his baby pastimes, how he was given name, his eating dirt, right? We just discussed how even eating dirt of the Lord is such a transcendental activity, how he would perform pranks and do mischief in his early childhood, teasing young girls on the banks of the Ganga, sitting on dirty pots, and so many other beautiful pastimes of how he was roaming around the house with his ankle bells, from and giving the feeling that Lord Hari is in the house. All this is described in chapter 14. That's the Balya Lila. In chapter 15, the Pauganda Lila of the Lord is discussed. His age 5 to 10. This is where Nimai started his studies and displayed his extraordinary intelligence as a super excellent student. And especially it is in this period that his elder brother Vishwarupa took sannyas. And also he got married to Lakshmi Devi in this particular period of Pauganda. Then Kaishora age of the Lord is 11 onwards, which is discussed in Adi Lila 16th chapter. This is where the Lord, when he became very learned, he set up his own school, he became famous, he toured East Bengal and spread his pastimes as Nimai Pandit. Then he also met there Tapan Mishra during his travels. It is during this time that Lakshmi Devi separated from Lord Chaitanya, departed from this world, and then later the Lord marries Vishnupriya. And this is also the place where the beautiful pastime of Lord Chaitanya defeating Keshav Kashmiri, who became a very humble devotee, is described. All this is in chapter 16, and chapter 17 is the Yauvan or the later youth pastimes. This is where the Lord, displaying his form as a devotee, how he became transformed after seeing Vishnupad in Gaya, received initiation from Ishwarapuri, and he just transformed, and he performed very, very beautiful pastimes. Whether the pastimes in Srivas Angan, where beautiful kirtan were happening, how he explained the Harer Nama verse to Shuklambar Brahmachari, how he reciprocated with great devotees like Advaita Acharya, Srivas Thakur, Kholave Sridhar, Murari Gupta, all these beautiful pastimes of the Lord's very intimate personal dealings with his various associates in Navadvip Dham is described. How he challenged and then transformed Chand Kazi through the first civil disobedience movement is also described. This is all in chapter 17. And how the Lord, during some of his interactions with his students, how the Lord was criticized by some of his students for talking about Gopi Bhav, and how that triggered a set of events leading to the Lord's contemplation of taking sannyas. Leading to the Lord's taking sannyas is discussed in chapter 17. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 5 chapters. The pastimes in these 5 chapters are hinted at in very brief in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but these pastimes are explained in great detail by Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So some of these pastimes, when we come to these chapters, hopefully in the not too distant future, after we get through 12, we will come to 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We will discuss this. So that is a brief overview of the Adi Lila. Again, very quickly, so that you can again clearly understand. 17 chapters, Adi Lila. Out of the 17, first 12 are the preface, the last 5 are the pastimes. Out of the 12 which are the preface, the first 7 are the explanation of the Mangalacharan, which is the first 14 verses of the first chapter. And these first 7 chapters establish the philosophical truths about Lord Chaitanya and his principal associates. So what we intend to do today with this broad overview is to enter into the Mangalacharan itself. And the Mangalacharan is very, very sweet, and each and every verse is immensely powerful, immensely purifying. So let us see how far we can get. At least I want to go through the 14 verses. That is the intention. We still have around 25 minutes. Now, I just want to briefly mention before I start, of course, our eternal gratitude is to Srila Prabhupada, who has taken the immense effort to translate and comment on this work. Actually, it so happened that Srila Prabhupada was busy writing Bhagavatam, and at one point, Srila Prabhupada was so worried with respect to his health and whether he will be able to be on the planet long enough to translate the Chaitanya Charitamrita that he stopped the translation of Bhagavatam and took over Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it is said, in a marathon manner, he started translating and writing his purports on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is said, in a period of around 7 months, Srila Prabhupada completed 11,519. It's just amazing. What Prabhupada has done is practically inconceivable. 11,519 verses. And he was not just translating and writing purport, he was referring to the commentaries on the Chaitanya Charitamrita by Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, the Anubhashya commentary. And he would refer to that and he would see and translate and then put from Bengali to English, and he produced his work. And Srila Prabhupada was so keen that these books be published as soon as possible. There's a very beautiful episode. I don't want to go into the details because we do not have so much time, but it's so beautiful that Prabhupada was so upset that he was translating with so much effort and writing the purports, but the books were not coming out and getting published. So he called his leaders who were into book production. I think it was mainly Rameshwar Prabhu and a few others. And he asked, why I'm writing these books day and night, why you are not publishing it? So they said, yeah, Prabhupada, yeah, we have been busy with the Bhagavatam and so many other things. Yeah, we can start by publishing. Now, Prabhupada had decided to do 7 volumes, divide the Chaitanya Charitamrita into 7 volumes. So they said, oh, Prabhupada, we can do 1 volume in 2 months. And like at that pace, we'll publish. Prabhupada said, no, that is too slow. I said, Prabhupada, we can publish, because publishing is, everything. Prabhupada was doing on a dictaphone, so much work to get an actual book published, including painting of pictures that we find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Prabhupada was so strongly emphasizing that he wanted to do it as soon as possible. Prabhupada said, no, Not one volume in 2 months. They said, okay, Prabhupada, one volume in 1 month. Prabhupada said, no, I want the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita published in 2 months. And they said, impossible. Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. So make it possible. So anyway, that's a beautiful pastime. So it was just published at an unimaginable speed. That is what we have. The original 7 set, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So amazing. Those who were painting, those who were supposed to produce the art, which is in the books, they were called and they also rushed and did so many paintings. Prabhupada agreed to give extra time to guide them. And within a few months, this amazing feat was performed to publish the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So of course, just want to remember the great sacrifice of Srila Prabhupada again. While we are glorifying Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and all these acharyas, in the modern time, one of the most important associates of Lord Chaitanya, who made it possible to actually fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, Prithivite Achayatha Nagaradi Gram Sarvatra Prachar Hoibo Maranam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted, and we will discuss this as we proceed through Chaitanya Charitamrita, that in every town and village my holy names will be preached. Who made that possible? Even Lord Chaitanya did not do it himself. Lord Chaitanya's principal associates did not do it themselves. They preached. They preached in Puri, they preached in Bengal, they preached in Vrindavan, they preached in certain parts of India, the various acharyas. But it was Srila Prabhupada who systematically disseminated Krishna consciousness all over the planet. So Prabhupada is a very, very, very special personality. He was a very confidential associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So those who are Gaudiya Vaishnavas have a very special attachment for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada was so attached. Prabhupada was, before he went to the West, he was staying in Radha Damodar Mandir in Vrindavan Dham. And he would pray very, very intensely to Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami is the Guru of Raghunath Das Goswami, who's the Guru of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He would pray so hard to get their blessing. So Prabhupada had such deep attachment to Rupa Goswami. In fact, Rupa Goswami gave darshan to Srila Prabhupada in that Radha Damodar temple and blessed him in his mission to go to the West to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I just want all of us to also understand this and appreciate this, that Prabhupada's effort in this whole regard is so extraordinary to make this available. So our humble obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and our gratitude to Prabhupada and of course his disciples to make the Chaitanya Charitamrita available to us. I remember, even though this is not the topic of my very first class in ISKCON, the first class that I ever heard was a class on Chaitanya Charitamrita. This was in 1993. And it was a class on Chaitanya Charitamrita delivered jointly by His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj and His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. Both. It was in a hall. It was a public program. And it was the first time I saw both of them. And it was the first time I saw any disciples of Prabhupada. And it was the first time I attended a class. And it was on Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I still remember that class. I remember what they were speaking. Because they were so wonderful. So I always had that special attraction. I was also fortunate. I got to touch the lotus feet of both of them, Radhanath Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj, that particular day. They were both standing next to each other. So I received their presence. Somehow I have that attraction. I have been hearing this pastime. So it is very sweet, especially when we hear Gaur Lila from those who have great attachment to Lord Chaitanya, and who are also part of this tree of Lord Chaitanya, who are sharing these divine pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, and being instrumental in sharing that mercy of Lord Chaitanya with the whole world. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila, I just want to emphasize, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila doesn't end with Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela will continue as long as the tree of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is manifest on this planet. It is continuing now in the form of the followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in fact, with all humility, we can say, by the grace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we all are also part of that tree, and in that way, we all are also part of the divine Leela, extended Leela of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the form of the Sankirtan movement. Because Lord Chaitanya performs his pastime, but he establishes the Sankirtan movement, which is his own extension. And that Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is still going on. And we are all both the beneficiaries, and some of us are also the proponents. Because some of us are not only learning, but some of us are also making an effort to share. So we are all pushing in our own way Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. And whoever pushes this movement, which Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has initiated, gets tremendous, immense blessings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita says that there is no one more dear to me than him who does so. He who explains, Ya idam paramam guhyam mad bhakteshu vidasyati bhakti mahim param kritva mame vaishyatya samshay. Srila Prabhupada would also often say that whoever will assist me in sharing and expanding these teachings of Lord Chaitanya with others will receive the full blessings and attain the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So that's an opportunity that is extended to all of us. I'm just mentioning this so we understand the fortunate position that we all are also in. That is also very important to understand. That we are not, first of all, we are just 500 years plus in distance, time distance from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Very close. 500. I just counted, right? 13 generations. We are in the 13th generation of descendants. 13. 1, 3. Can you imagine? 1, 3. So close to Lord Chaitanya. We are in the extended pastimes. And I'm mentioning this so that we understand how fortunate we are. And it is now up to all of us to take benefit of that good fortune which has been extended to us by learning, absorbing, embodying, and propagating the glories of Lord Chaitanya and his Sankirtan movement. Okay. So sorry, this was a small deviation, but I thought it was important for us to understand and appreciate. So I'm going to get into the topic of the first chapter, the Mangalacharan itself. So I'm going to recite the verses and briefly explain. Now, the reason I'm going to briefly explain the verses is each of the verse of the Mangalacharan, there is a full chapter dedicated to explaining it. So I'm not going to explain it today in detail. Okay. The first 14 verses of the Mangalacharan, which we will go through today, and they are briefly again explained about what is the significance in the next 20 verses. But the detailed explanation is over 7 chapters. So obviously I don't intend to cover 7 chapters today. So if you're thinking, why is Prabhu going so fast? It is because I just want to give you a quick hint or quick overview of the Mangalacharan, for which I think this 10-12 minutes should be adequate. So Mangal Acharan itself means invocation, the invocation of auspiciousness. So it is the tradition that always when we start any important spiritual activity, writing a book is a very important spiritual activity. or any other important. Even before we give a class, we start with Mangalacharan, because when we are doing a spiritual activity, we want to invoke what? Mangal, auspiciousness. And auspiciousness comes by invoking the grace of Guru and Krishna, the spiritual masters and the Lord himself. So one offers namaskar to the Lord and requests the Lord to shower his grace so that we can actually be empowered to do the service that we are about to initiate. So that is the mood in which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami does the Mangalacharan. Also in the Mangalacharan, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami offers obeisances and glorifies the key personalities and the truths which are expanded in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, their connection, Lord Nityananda, Advaita Charya, Panchatattva. These are the principal concepts. And there are a few other things also which we will come to. So I want to start with the first verse. So the first verse, or the first two verses, are actually obeisances to the worshipable deities. Ishta Deva Namaskara. This is how the Acharyas explain. So what is the first verse? The first verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita goes like this. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Isham Ishavatarakan Tat Prakasham Cha Tat Shakti Krishna Chaitanya Samyakam. The first verse of the Adi Lila, or the first verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is offering respects to the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Truth, by saying that the Supreme Truth manifests in 6 forms. And these are all 6 forms, are all manifestations of that same absolute truth. What are these 6 forms? Vande Gurun, the spiritual masters. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami especially emphasizes that the spiritual masters is both the Diksha and the Shiksha Gurus. Those who initiate and those who teach and train. Both. And in fact, in Chaitanya Charitamrita especially, this philosophical principle is emphasized that the initiating and the instructing spiritual masters are equally important. The Shiksha and Diksha Gurus are equally important and should be treated as such. And by pleasing them, one makes spiritual advancement. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan. Isha Bhaktan means devotees of the Lord. And it is especially emphasized that when we talk about devotees, we talk about 2 categories of devotees. Prabhupada uses a very interesting word. Prabhupada says the apprentices and the graduates. 2 types of devotees. Who are the graduates? The pure devotees who have perfect pure love. They are the graduates. And who are the apprentices? Those who are learning, the sadhakas, still trying to become perfect. But those who are faithfully executing the path of sadhana bhakti. He says, my respects to all the devotees, the sadhakas also, as well as the perfected devotees. My obeisances to the Isham, the Supreme Lord, Ishavatarakan, the incarnations of the Lord. Tat Prakashams, the various manifestations and expansions of the Lord. The Prakasha, Vilasa, expansions of the Lord. Tat Shakti, and his Shaktis, the potencies of the Lord, the internal potencies of the Lord. Broadly, Prabhupada describes the internal potencies are actually the consorts of the Lord. And there are broadly 3 kinds of consorts of the Lord. Now, this is explained in detail further. Actually, the first chapter, because we are only covering the Mangalacharan today, right? Means the 14 verses, not the full Mahaprabhu. There's the 14 verses expanded in 7 chapters. but we're just going to go through quickly. But the first two verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita are explained in the first full chapter. The full chapter after the 14 verses or roughly 30 verses, because after that the explanation starts, is an explanation of only the first two verses of the first chapter of the Adi Lila first chapter. So there this is discussed in more detail, but principally there are three types of consorts of the Lord. They are called as the Lakshmis, who are the Lord's consorts in Vaikuntha, the Mahishis, who are the Lord's consorts, the queens of Dwarka, and the Vrajagopis, the consorts of the Lord's in Vrindavan. These are all manifestations of the Lord's internal potency. And finally he says, Krishna Chaitanya Samgyakam, that this absolute truth, these six manifestations of absolute truth are actually the manifestations of Krishna Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is the supreme absolute truth. That supreme absolute truth which manifests in the world in these six features. After having said this, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami offers obeisances to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Very beautiful verse, a very famous verse. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahoditau Gaudodaye Pushpavantau Chitrau Shandau Tamonudau. Obeisances unto Shri Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who have arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Gau Benedict, all by dissipating the darkness of ignorance. So Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are compared to a sun and the moon. Sun and the moon are both giving light, but both have simultaneously arisen in Gaudadesh in Bengal. Why? To shower their grace, their benediction on all living entities. So this verse is also, so first two verses, which are the Ishtadeva Namaskar, obeisances to the worshipable deities, is discussed in great detail across the first chapter. Having said this, immediately the next verse, now you may be wondering, Prabhu, why are you going verse by verse? I'm going verse by verse only for the first 14 verses, because the first 14 verses are covered over the 7 chapters. So I just want you to be familiar with the verses so you understand this. So we are not going to be doing this, across the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but we are going through the first 14 because they are extremely, extremely important. The third verse is explaining who is the Supreme Lord, Lord Chaitanya, and his connection with Krishna. This verse is also known as the Vastu Nirdesh, or what is the chief objective of the book. And this verse says very beautifully, I'll just quickly recite the verse and then I will briefly explain it. Yad Advaitam Brahmopanishadi Tad Api Asyat Anubha Ya Atmantara Yami Purusha Iti So Asyamsha Vibhavaha Shad Aishwaryahi Purno Ya Iha Bhagwan Sat Swayam Ayam Nat Chaitanyat Krishna Jagati Paratatvam Param Iha. What the Upanishads describe as the unlimited Brahma Jyoti is just an effulgence of his body. And what is understood as the super soul, the Paramatma, permeating the heart of every living entity and each and every atom and subatomic particle, is just his localized plenary portion. It's just an amsha of his, localized plenary portion. That supreme personality of Godhead, the supreme Lord Bhagwan, who's full of Shad Aishwarya, 6 opulences, is Lord Chaitanya, who is not different from Krishna at all. And there is no other truth superior to him. So, Having said these three, the fourth verse, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami seeks Ashirvad or blessings from the Lord. He says, a very beautiful, very famous verse. Anarpita charim chirat karunayavatir naha kalau samarpaitum unnatojvala rasam swabhakti shriyam haripurata sundara dyuti kadamba sandipitaha sada hridaya kandare sfuratau vaha sachinandanaha. He's invoking blessings of Lord Chaitanya by saying that this Lord Chaitanya has mercifully appeared in Kali Yuga to give what no other incarnation of the Lord has given before. No incarnation of the Lord has given before. What? The Lord has given so many blessings, including mukti. Even in certain incarnations, bhakti, but that bhakti which is of conjugal love, the most elevated unnatojvala rasa, the topmost of all transcendental rasas, especially in the mood of lover and beloved, that was never given by Krishna in any incarnation, but Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself, who is resplendent in this particular form with a golden effulgence, he has come to give it. And may that personality who is known as the son of Sachi Mata, may he be situated in the innermost chambers of our heart. That is the invocation of blessings. He's praying that may that Lord Chaitanya, so let us also pray in that mood, that may that Lord Chaitanya, who has come to give that highest love, be situated in the innermost chambers of your heart. So in this way, in the first four verses, he has done the namaskar, the vastu nirdesh and the ashirvad. And then for the rest of the verses, in the Mangalacharan, please, I hope you don't mind, I'll just go on for a few minutes more. Just quickly go through the 14 verses, then we'll discuss them in more detail. He explains what is the reason for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. In very brief, because there are chapters dedicated to discussing this in the next few chapters. So he first starts explaining what is this Gaura Tattva. Radha Krishna Pranay Vikritir Ladinir Shaktir Asmad Ekatmanav Api Bhuvi Pura Deha Bhedam Gatau Tau Chaitanyakham Prakatam Madhuna Tadvayam Chaikyam Aptam Radha Bhavadyuti Suvalitam Naumi Krishna Swarupam. This is also very, very famous and very beautiful verse describing the tattva of Lord Chaitanya. This is the verse which defines the tattva of Lord Chaitanya. And what is the tattva of Lord Chaitanya? That one supreme truth which became two, Radha and Krishna. The one became two as Radha and Krishna. The enjoyer, topmost enjoyer and the topmost enjoyed. Why? For the purpose of pleasure. But the same who became two again became eager to become one. The one became two and the two became eager to become one because they found that this bhakti is so wonderful. To experience bhakti, they became two, but they found bhakti so wonderful that Bhagwan wanted to experience the bhakti of his topmost devotee, who is his energy. So these two have again united in the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. I bow down to that Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself, not an incarnation. He is Krishna himself with the bodily complexion of Srimati Radha Rani. Krishna is covered with a golden complexion, and that is why Krishna is Gaura. Gaura means golden, fair. Normally Krishna is dark, Krishna is Ghanashyama complexion. But how Lord Chaitanya is Gaura? Because Krishna covered himself with the complexion of Radharani. Because the complexion of Radharani is representative of the bhav of Radharani, which is the Unnatojvala rasa, the topmost rasa. And then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains the three internal reasons for the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. I'm not going to go through them now. We'll discuss that in great detail because it's a very beautiful topic. I'll just quickly recite them, but we'll not discuss them. Desiring to understand the glory of Radharani's love. What are the wonderful qualities in Krishna that Radharani alone relishes through her love? And what is the happiness that she feels when she realizes the sweetness of Krishna's love? To experience and understand this, Krishna came in the form of, Krishna came himself taking the mood of Srimati Radharani. So after explaining the reasons for Lord Chaitanya's appearance, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the rest of the Mangalacharan briefly describes the Nityananda Mahatva and the Advaita Tattva and then the Pancha Tattva, three concepts. So just 2 minutes more. So briefly he says, we are also going to talk, because we cannot talk about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila without talking about Nityananda and Advaita, because they are the two principal branches of the tree of Lord Chaitanya, which will be explained a little later in this chapter and also in chapter 8. He says, who is this Nityananda Ram that we are talking about? He is not just another devotee. He is Lord Balaram. He is the Moola Sankarshan, the original Sankarshan. The other Chaturvyuha are coming from him. And then the Karanodakshai Vishnu, Mahavishnu is coming from that Sankarshan, and from Karanodakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu is coming from Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu is coming, and from Kshirodakshay Vishnu, Sheshanag is coming. But the root of this whole tree is, of this all these incarnations, is Nityananda Balaram. So this Lord Nityananda who is walking around the streets of Nadia with Lord Chaitanya and dancing and chanting and going home to home requesting people to chant is this Lord, whose expansion of the expansion from the pores of whose skins all universes are coming. That is the Lord. That is Lord Nityananda. Please understand. And who is Advaita? Advaita is the incarnation of that Karnodakshay Vishnu. That Mahavishnu is Advaita Acharya himself. He is that form of the Lord who has come for the purpose of manifesting this material creations through the agency of Maya. And why is he called Advaita? He is called Advaita for a few reasons. One is not different from the Lord. He is called Advaita. And he is called Acharya because even though he is the Lord, he comes in the form of a devotee. He is Bhakta Avatara and he teaches bhakti. He is an example of a Bhakta, and that is why he is an Acharya. He who instructs or teaches by his own example. That is why he is known as Advaita Acharya. He is the incarnation of the Lord and incarnation of the Lord's devotee simultaneously. And that is why I take shelter of him. And the last verse from the series of 14 verses is the famous Panchatattva verse. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. That I offer my obeisances to Lord Krishna in his 5 features. In the Chaitanya Lila, Krishna is manifesting in 5 features. What are those 5 features? Bhakta Rupa, the form of a devotee, who's Lord Chaitanya himself. Swarupakam, his personal expansion, 'Expansion, who is Lord Nityananda. Bhaktavataram, incarnation of a devotee, is Advaitacharya. Bhakta is devotee, Shrivas Thakur. And Bhakta Shakti, the energy of the Lord, is Gadadhar Pandit, who is an incarnation of Radharani. So in Chaitanya Lila, the Lord is manifested in these 5 features. Bhakta Rupa, Swarupa, Bhaktavatara, Bhakta and Bhakta Shakti. Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Advaitacharya, Gadadhara, Shrivas and Gadadhar. If you remember when we many times we worshipped the Pancha Tattva picture of the Lord, these 5 personalities. Even in Mayapur, we have Lord Chaitanya and then 2 personalities on this side, 2 personalities on this side. They are the Pancha Tattva. So to advance in Krishna Bhakti, Prabhupada explains, and based on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that if we get blessings of the Pancha Tattva, we can make advancement in Bhakti very, very rapidly, because all the 5 primary features of the Lord, especially in connection to Bhakti and advancement in Bhakti, are manifested in the Pancha Tattva. So I'm going to stop here for today. I know this is a bit philosophical and it may be a little bit heavy. So if some of you who are very new are finding, oh, I am not able to understand anything, or understanding I don't think you'll not understand anything, but you're not understanding everything or understanding part of it, do not be worried. That you may not be able to understand everything if you do not have the full background. But please rest assured that simply by hearing the subject matter with faith, even though we may not be able to fully understand, we will get immense purification, because there is very, very special potency and there is special blessing which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has given to his hearers in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the power of these great devotees is extraordinary, and by their blessings, Lord Chaitanya will be situated in the innermost core of our heart. That is what we desire, right? So please bear with me. So we are not going to be going into too much detail of all these concepts. I'm going to go through the first 12 chapters relatively fast. Okay. And what we will do is, my intention is, because we want to do Pravaha, we will try to cover the first 12 chapters fast. I do not know in how many sessions. Let us see. We'll try to cover them fast to get enough philosophical overview of these key tattvas. Because again, like we said, unless we understand the philosophically what is the position of these tattvas, what is their interrelationship, we will not be able to actually appreciate the pastimes. Because this is not about, like I said, right? Krishna eating dirt. If you don't understand Krishna's position, then Krishna's eating dirt is, we will not understand anything. So we have to understand who are these personalities who are participating in this pastime. Then it will be possible for us to develop better appreciation and also receive better benefit. So we will do that quickly, the 12 chapters, and then the 5 chapters which are the Adi Lila will go into great detail. Great detail means not verse by verse, but we'll go into the pastimes. And my intention is, as we go through the pastimes, some of these philosophical points I'll go into depth as we go into some of this and bring them up, rather than cover them in the first 12 chapters in too much detail. I hope that is okay. Just so that it will be more easier for us to digest it. Yeah. So I'm just opening up the floor. I know it is slightly late, forgive me, but I wanted to go through 14 verses at least. So what I will encourage for the devotees is to please read. Those who want to study along, anybody wants to study along, how many of you are interested to read along or study along the Chaitanya Charitamrita? I know it's a mammoth task. It is not easy at all, but anybody is intending, you can raise your hands, then I can understand. Everybody's scared. Okay, one. Suraj. Okay, good. I know there are a few who intend. Okay, so for those who are wanting to do that, you can read Yeah, those who want to attempt can attempt. I'm not going to chase anybody, ask anybody, or keep track. This is for your own, purpose, whatever way you can. If you cannot read through all the purports, at least read the translations so you can follow along. So whatever level you can do, there's no policing here, there is no checking. This is just a gentle encouragement. So if you want to read, please read at least the first chapter. If you cannot read all the purpose, just read through the translations. This is the homework for those who want to read along, study along. Thank you. Yes, I saw a few other hands raised. Thank you. I saw Siniji, Archana, Lila ji. Amit had also mentioned that he wants to discuss as well. I mean, study along as well. So thank you for those who want to do that. So I'm opening up the floor. Any questions, any comments? Are you finding this just too indigestible? Yes, Sapna ji has also raised the hand. Is this for a question or for study along?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have one question
Yes.
on another note.
Yes.
If you're telling Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study, then what comes in PhD, Prabhuji? Just wanted to.
PhD is to enter into the pastimes. You have to live. You have to live. PhD means you have to live Chaitanya Charitamrita. See, the whole idea of Chaitanya Charitamrita is the demonstration of the Lord, of the life of a pure devotee, the culture of pure devotion, how devotees behave, interact, live, what is their determination, what is their relationship, right? And that's the demo. So the intention of the demo is that we become the embodiment of a personality from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that is the goal.
Good.
So that's why when we see some of these very senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada, many devotees feel that, these are embodiments of Lord Chaitanya, of characters from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila. I've especially heard this. Of course, there may be many devotees who are like that. I've especially heard this, in relation with Jayapataka Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, and a few others. That the way they act, behave, and their attachment to Lord Chaitanya, and the way they live their lives reminds of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. So that is our PhD. Our PhD is to become Gaudiya Vaishnavas in the true sense. So we become the living examples of Lord Chaitanya's associates. We become truly a part of the tree, not just theoretically, but we live in that way. That is the fruit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hari Bol. Okay, any other point? Okay, so thank you very much for attending, and please continue. Do not worry. You understand, don't understand, let even if 2% goes inside, you will be purified. And soon when we come to the Lila, you will find it very easy to follow along. Very easy. In fact, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are so much more easier to understand and follow as compared to even the Bhagavatam. So you'll find it very, very easy and very relishable and very enjoyable. So make an effort. Philosophy is usually a little bit more difficult, but please be a bit patient and understand the tattva, at least the basic principles, then we will be able to get better benefit. Yeah, anything else? Anyone? Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All glories, thank you. All glories to Lord Chaitanya and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Hari Hari.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna
Hari
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Thank